It was a quiet evening, one of those lazy weekends where nothing much seems to happen, at least that's what I thought. The house was unusually still, and the air carried a strange sort of calm, the kind that almost makes you uneasy if you pay too much attention to it. My uncle was home that day, and like he usually did on Saturdays, he went to his room after lunch, locked the door, and fell into one of his long naps. That was normal. What wasn't normal, what I didn't expect, was what I was about to find out while he slept. I've always had a close relationship with my uncle. He's more like a big brother than a father figure. Always joking around, always smiling, and honestly, I've never had a reason to doubt him or think he was hiding anything. But sometimes, life doesn't give you warnings before it shifts. Sometimes, it just drops something in your lap, and you don't even know how to react. That day, I stumbled across something I wish I hadn't. Something that changed how I saw him. Something that made me question not just his truth, but everything I thought I understood about loyalty and trust. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking to uncover anything. It all started because the Wi-Fi wasn't working. I needed to reboot the router, which was weirdly placed in the small room next to my uncle's. That room used to be a storage space, and no one really went in there anymore. I figured I'd reset it quickly and go back to watching videos. But when I stepped inside, I noticed his voice, not in the room, but faintly through the wall. At first, I thought he was just on a call. But it wasn't a phone call. The words I heard didn't sound like something you say during a casual chat. They sounded personal, intimate, and oddly tense. I froze. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was mishearing things. But curiosity has a way of taking over, especially when something doesn't feel right. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but something in my gut told me this wasn't just a regular conversation. I stood still, listened closely, and the more I heard, the more unsettled I became. There were pauses, whispers, and names I didn't recognize. One name in particular kept coming up, Tina. I didn't know who she was, but from the way he spoke, she wasn't just a friend. Not even close. My uncle, who always joked about how complicated relationships could be, who always said trust was the most important part of love, sounded like someone else entirely. His voice was low, careful, almost like he didn't want anyone to hear him. Which made sense, because what he was saying wasn't meant to be heard, especially not by family. That's when I started to realize something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I tried to brush it off, told myself maybe it was just a movie or a show he left running. But that voice, it was live. And it wasn't just him. There was a woman's voice too. Soft, flirtatious, emotional. She was talking about meeting again, about missing him. My heart started racing. I knew what I was hearing wasn't just a random moment. This was something secret. Something hidden for a reason. I backed out of the room slowly, barely breathing. My hands were cold. My mind was racing. I didn't know what to think. Was my uncle cheating? Was this woman married too? Was this some kind of long-term thing or something new? All I knew was, I had stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to find, and now I couldn't unhear it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but everything in me said this wasn't innocent. What I didn't know at the time was that this moment would lead me deeper into a story that was bigger than I ever imagined. A story filled with secrets, regrets, and choices that can't be taken back. All while my uncle lay sleeping in his room, completely unaware that the truth he thought was hidden had already started unraveling. But that's just the beginning. What happened after I left that room is something I never saw coming. I closed the door gently behind me and stood in the hallway for a few seconds, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept telling myself I had no reason to panic, that maybe it was something harmless, that I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I'd never heard my uncle speak like that before, not with that kind of emotion, not with that kind of secrecy. I tried to go about the rest of my afternoon like nothing happened, but everything suddenly felt different. I couldn't focus. I couldn't even sit still. Something had shifted, and I didn't know what to do with it. That night, I kept replaying what I'd heard. The woman's voice, soft and familiar with his. His laugh, quieter than usual, almost nervous. There was a kind of tension in his words, like this wasn't just some casual fling. It felt complicated. Emotional. Real. And the name Tina kept circling in my head. I couldn't shake it. I had never heard my uncle mention her before. Not once. And for someone who tells me almost everything, from stories about his wild youth to advice about life and relationships, that silence felt louder than anything. The next day, I started paying more attention. Not in a creepy or suspicious way, but little things stood out. His phone was suddenly always face down. He kept getting random texts at night and would either ignore them or quietly slip away to answer them. He was more distracted than usual, and at times, his mood would switch quickly, from light and joking to distant and lost in thought. I didn't want to believe anything bad about him. He's been a role model to me in so many ways. But something was going on, and I was already in the middle of it whether I wanted to be or not. I started remembering things from the past few weeks that hadn't made sense at the time. A couple of times, he'd said he was heading to the gym but came back in a totally different outfit. One time, he borrowed my car for no clear reason and returned it with less gas and a faint trace of perfume that definitely wasn't from air freshener. Again, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to accuse him of something that wasn't true. But the pieces were starting to come together in a way I couldn't ignore. Then came the day I accidentally saw one of his messages. I was handing him his phone after it buzzed while he was in the kitchen, and the screen lit up for just a second. It was a message from Tina Redhart. My stomach dropped. I didn't even read the text, but the name and the heart emoji were enough. This wasn't just someone he was talking to casually. This meant something. And it was real. Still, I didn't confront him. I didn't even mention it. I started feeling like I was holding on to this heavy secret, and I didn't know who to talk to. I couldn't tell my aunt, his wife, because what if I was wrong? What if this whole thing was just a misunderstanding? But the deeper I looked, the more things lined up in a way that couldn't be explained away. That week, I overheard another conversation. This time, it was clearer. He was talking to Tina again, and she was upset. She was saying things like, "You promised me, and you said she didn't matter anymore." That last part, "she didn't matter anymore," hit me hard. Was he talking about my aunt? Was Tina someone from his past he had never truly let go of? Or someone new who had come in and shaken everything up? Whatever it wasn't just flirtation. It was a relationship. And someone was bound to get hurt. The worst part was seeing my aunt, going about her day like everything was fine. Smiling, laughing, making dinner, asking me how school was going. She had no idea. And maybe that's what made everything feel heavier, knowing something she didn't, watching someone I cared about be lied to, and feeling powerless to do anything about it. The guilt started to eat at me, but so did the confusion. What if there was more to the story? What if my uncle had a reason? Was there a side I hadn't seen yet? I knew I couldn't keep living in this weird in-between space. But I also knew that asking questions could break everything open. And once the truth is out, there's no way to take it back. What I didn't know at the time was that this was only the surface. The real secret, the one that would change everything, was still waiting to be discovered. The days that followed were filled with questions I couldn't answer. I found myself constantly watching both of them, my uncle and my aunt. Every small gesture felt loaded. Every smile he gave her seemed faker than the last. And I hated thinking like that. I didn't want to become someone who saw lies everywhere, but when you hear something you weren't supposed to, your whole view shifts. You start noticing things. And once that switch flips, you can't just go back to being unaware. I kept wondering how long it had been going on. Was this something recent? Or had Tina been in the picture for months, or even years? The more I thought about it, the more I remembered this one night, a few months ago, when my aunt had gone to visit her sister for the weekend. My uncle had stayed back, saying he had work stuff to handle. At the time, no one questioned it. But now, it felt suspicious. That weekend he had stayed out late both nights, came home smelling like cologne he never usually wore, and seemed unusually cheerful afterward. I thought it was just him enjoying a break from routine. But maybe it was something else entirely. Then there was this one moment that hit differently. My aunt asked me to help her look for a missing receipt in the living room drawers. As I was digging through the mess of papers, I came across a small folded photo, nothing printed, just a Polaroid tucked between pages. It was a picture of my uncle smiling with a woman who wasn't my aunt. The background was a dim restaurant. They looked close, like they had shared something more than just a meal. I didn't show her. I couldn't. My hands shook as I quietly slipped it back into the drawer and pretended like I hadn't seen anything. Around the same time, a second subplot started unfolding. My cousin, their daughter, began acting strange too. She's 15, smart, and way more observant than people give her credit for. One day, she asked me, completely out of nowhere, "Do you think Dad's happy with Mom?" I froze. I didn't know how to answer. I asked her why she was asking that, and she just shrugged, said she'd been hearing things. I didn't push her, but deep down I wondered, had she also heard him talking to Tina? Was she dealing with the same weight I was, silently? The most complicated part of all this was that I didn't know who the real villain was. Was it my uncle, for lying and cheating? Or was there more to it? Could there be something broken in their marriage that none of us saw? Something that pushed him into the arms of someone else? I kept going in circles, trying to make sense of it all. Maybe Tina didn't even know he was married. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, someone was being hurt, and the damage was already spreading beyond just the two of them. I thought about confronting him so many times. Rehearsed the words in my head. But every time I saw him, he looked so normal. Like the man I'd always trusted. And that's what made it all harder, the double life, the hidden truth behind his everyday smiles. And every second I waited, the silence between us got louder. The secrets were still there, buried under routines, laughter, and quiet dinners. But they were starting to leak through the cracks. And I knew it was only a matter of time before everything blew up. The tension in the house grew thicker every day. I could feel it in the way my aunt's smiles became a little too forced, how her eyes sometimes flicked toward my uncle with that unspoken worry that comes when you suspect something but don't know for sure. And my uncle, he was quieter now, more distant, like he was carrying a weight that didn't belong to him alone. Every time I caught him looking at his phone, a shadow passed over his face, something I couldn't place but knew meant trouble. One evening, the whole family was gathered for dinner. The kind of normal scene that, on the surface, looked perfect. My aunt was laughing, my cousin was joking around, and my uncle kept stealing glances at his phone under the table. I wanted to reach out, to say something, but the words caught in my throat. The silence between them was loud, filled with secrets no one dared to speak. I could almost hear the unspoken questions hanging in the air, questions about trust, betrayal, and what the future held for all of us. That night, I found myself lying awake, replaying everything I'd seen and heard over the past weeks. The hidden conversations, the mysterious texts from Tina, the photo I'd stumbled upon. It all felt like a ticking time bomb ready to explode. I kept wondering, how much longer could this go on before someone cracked? Before the truth tore through the fragile peace we had left? Then, out of nowhere, my cousin came to me with a look I'd never seen before, eyes wide, voice trembling. "I think they know," she whispered. It was the moment when I realized this wasn't just my burden anymore. The secret was spreading, and with it came the danger of everything falling apart. I knew the breaking point was close. The quiet before the storm. And as my uncle finally got up and walked to his room that night, phone in hand, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Whatever was waiting behind that door was about to change everything. And none of us were ready for what would come next. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, the next day brought a twist I never saw coming. I was helping my aunt in the kitchen, trying to keep things as normal as possible, when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face suddenly went pale. Without a word, she slipped out of the room, and curiosity got the better of me. I followed, careful to stay out of sight. I heard her voice on the phone, trembling as she spoke to someone I couldn't hear. "What do you mean he's been hiding this from me? How long has it been going on?" Her words were sharp, desperate. I felt like I'd walked into a scene from a drama I wasn't supposed to witness. Then, out of nowhere, she mentioned a name, Tina. My heart dropped. This wasn't just my secret anymore. My aunt knew. But then, the real shock hit. A few minutes later, I caught a glimpse of a message on my aunt's phone. It wasn't from Tina. It was from another number, someone calling her Lisa. I stared at it, confused. Lisa? Who was Lisa? That night, the pieces I thought I understood started twisting in ways I hadn't expected. Could it be that Tina wasn't the only one? That maybe this wasn't just about one affair? What if there was a second secret, another woman involved? Or was it something else entirely? The walls of trust that held my family together were cracking wide open, and no one was safe from what might tumble out. The tension was unbearable. Every glance, every whispered conversation, now felt like it was hiding another layer of truth. And I knew that whatever was coming next was going to change everything. The calm before the storm had vanished, replaced by a storm that was growing louder by the hour. And when my uncle finally answered the door that night, his eyes told a story no one was prepared for. That night, I finally confronted my uncle. The weight of all the secrets, the silence, the hidden messages, it was too much to carry alone. I found him in his room, the door slightly ajar, phone in hand, eyes tired but guarded. I didn't know how to start, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. I told him what I'd heard, what I'd seen, and what I suspected. His face went pale, then hardened, like a wall rising between us. To my surprise, he didn't deny it. Instead, he sighed and told me everything, the affair with Tina, the guilt he'd been carrying, and how he felt trapped in a marriage that had slowly fallen apart. But then came the part one didn't expect. He confessed there was no Lisa, at least not the way we thought. Lisa was someone from his past, a name he used in messages to cover for the real Tina, who had asked to stay completely hidden. The second number? A false lead he created himself, trying to protect his family from even more pain. My aunt's sudden knowledge wasn't a coincidence either. He had told her himself, hoping honesty would save what was left. But instead, it fractured everything further. My cousin's silence, my aunt's shock, it was all part of a fragile balance none of us knew how to hold. Just when I thought this was the end of it, my uncle's phone buzzed again. A new message popped up on the screen, this time from a number neither of us recognized. The message was simple: "We need to talk." And with that, I realized the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The message on my uncle's phone hung in the air like a dark cloud, reminding me that some stories don't end neatly. But that night, something shifted for all of us. After the tough conversations, my aunt and uncle decided to face the truth together, not as enemies, but as people trying to find a way forward. They agreed to seek help through counseling, honest talks, and space to heal. It wasn't an easy choice, and there were no guarantees, but it was a start. The trust broken wouldn't mend overnight, but opening the door to honesty was the first step towards something better. My cousin, who had been quietly carrying her own doubts, found relief in knowing the truth, even if it hurt. She started talking more openly, and the tension that had been suffocating her slowly eased. For all of us, the experience became a lesson in how complicated love and family can be. Sometimes, even the people closest to you can surprise you, but that doesn't mean the bonds are beyond repair. Looking back, I realized that discovering my uncle's secret wasn't just about betrayal, It was about understanding the messy, painful parts of human relationships. It reminded me that everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes, the hardest thing is to face those mistakes honestly. This story is about trust lost and maybe, just maybe, trust being rebuilt. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever faced secrets or struggled with difficult truths, remember you're not alone. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from facing the hard things head on, even when it's scary. 2.